The officer was finishing his shift when a tiny puppy, trembling and crying, ran out onto the empty street. It wasn't the tears or the desperation in the pup's eyes that froze him. It was the shiny, unusual collar around its neck. What he discovered next left him speechless. The quiet streets of Maplewood were bathed in the golden glow of the early morning sun. Officer Nathan Harper had just wrapped up a long night shift and was looking forward to heading home. It had been an uneventful night, the kind he preferred. No emergencies, no disturbances, just the peaceful hum of a small-town routine. As he pulled his cruiser into the station parking lot, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. A small figure darted across the road, wobbling on tiny legs. Nathan squinted, adjusting his gaze to the source of the motion. A puppy, barely a few months old, was running frantically, its tiny cries cutting through the stillness of the morning. Nathan quickly stepped out of his car, instinctively crouching to the ground. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, his voice gentle to avoid scaring the trembling creature. The puppy, a scruffy little thing with floppy ears and a golden coat, stopped a few feet away, panting heavily as if it had run a long way. Its wide, tear-filled eyes met Nathan's, filled with a desperation that made his heart clench. "Where did you come from, buddy?" Nathan murmured, extending a hand slowly. The puppy hesitated but eventually scampered forward, pressing its tiny body against his leg as if seeking comfort and protection. Nathan gently scooped it up, noticing how cold and fragile it felt in his arms. That's when he saw it, the collar. At first glance, it looked ordinary, a leather band with a shiny tag dangling from it. But as Nathan turned it over to read the inscription, his breath caught in his throat. The tag wasn't engraved with an address or phone number. Instead, it bore a single, cryptic word in elegant script: "Help." Nathan's stomach churned. What did this mean? Who would put such a message on a collar? And more importantly, where had this puppy come from? The officer glanced around, his instincts on high alert. The street was deserted, and there were no signs of anyone nearby who might have been looking for the pup. As the puppy let out another soft whimper, Nathan felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just a stray dog, this was a cry for help. And he was going to find out why. Nathan carried the trembling puppy into the police station, its tiny body pressed firmly against his chest. The morning sun illuminated the building's faded brick facade, and the familiar scent of coffee and paperwork greeted him as he stepped inside. Officer Jenny Carter, Nathan's partner, was at her desk, sipping from a steaming mug. She looked up with a puzzled expression when she saw the puppy in his arms. "Starting a rescue shelter now, Harper?" she teased, though her tone softened when she saw the concern on his face. "This little guy ran out to me crying," Nathan said, setting the puppy on the desk. The pup whimpered and curled into a tight ball, still visibly shaken. "But it's not just that, look at this." He handed the collar to Jenny, who raised an eyebrow as she read the inscription, "Help." Jenny's playful demeanor faded instantly. "That's unusual," she said, her brow furrowing. "Are you sure he's not just lost?" Nathan shook his head. "No ID, no microchip, and no sign of anyone looking for him. And the way he ran up to me, it's like he knew I could help." Jenny reached out to pet the puppy, who flinched slightly but then leaned into her touch. "Poor thing," she murmured. "He's terrified." Nathan sat down at his desk, setting the collar beside him as he booted up his computer. "I'm going to check local reports. Missing dogs, break-ins, anything unusual. Someone might have left a message on the collar for a reason." While Nathan sifted through the database, Jenny prepared a small bowl of water and some scraps of chicken from her lunch, coaxing the puppy to eat. "You think this is connected to something bigger?" she asked. "I don't know," Nathan replied, his eyes scanning the screen. "But it feels off." As the minutes passed, Nathan's search came up empty. There were no reports of missing dogs matching the puppy's description, and no incidents in the area that seemed related. Frustrated but undeterred, he decided to expand his search radius. Just as he was about to give up, Jenny spoke. "Hey, look at this," she said, holding up the collar. She had flipped it inside out, revealing a tiny, almost imperceptible stitching on the inner side. It wasn't just a decorative pattern. It was a series of letters and numbers, carefully embroidered into the leather. "What is that?" Nathan asked, leaning closer. It looks like coordinates, Jenny said, grabbing her phone to confirm. She typed the numbers into a mapping app, her eyes widening as the location popped up. It's about 15 miles from here, an old cabin near Pinewood Forest. Nathan frowned. That's a remote area. Not many people go out there, especially this time of year. Jenny nodded. Do you think whoever left this message wanted someone to find the cabin? Nathan glanced at the puppy, who had finally relaxed enough to eat a few bites of chicken. It's possible. Either way, I don't think we can ignore this. An hour later, Nathan and Jenny were driving down a winding dirt road leading toward Pinewood Forest. The puppy, now nicknamed Scout by Jenny, sat on her lap, occasionally letting out a soft whine as if sensing the importance of their journey. The road grew narrower as they approached the coordinates, the towering pine trees casting long shadows over the path. Finally, they arrived at the location. A weathered cabin with a sagging roof and boarded-up windows. It looked abandoned, but there were faint signs of recent activity. Tire tracks in the dirt, a broken branch near the entrance, and a faint glow coming from one of the windows. Nathan parked the car and turned to Jenny. Stay with Scout, I'll check it out. Jenny started to protest but stopped when she saw the determined look in his eyes. Be careful, she said. Nathan approached the cabin cautiously, his hand resting on the holster of his service weapon. He knocked on the door, but there was no response. The faint glow inside flickered, suggesting a candle or flashlight. Pushing the door open, Nathan stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The interior was sparse, an old table, a few chairs, and a pile of blankets in the corner. But what caught his attention was a small wooden box on the table. It was intricately carved, with a lock that had been recently broken. Inside the box were several photographs, each one showing a different dog. Some looked like strays, while others wore collars similar to Scout's. Beneath the photos was a handwritten note that sent a chill down Nathan's spine. They're watching. Protect them. Nathan's mind raced. Who was they? And what did these dogs have in common? He grabbed the box and returned to the car, where Jenny was waiting anxiously. What did you find? She asked. Nathan placed the box on the dashboard, showing her the photos and the note. Someone's been keeping records. These dogs, they're part of something bigger. Scout let out a sudden bark, startling them both. The puppy's wide eyes were fixed on the woods, his small body trembling once again. Jenny followed his gaze. Do you think there's more out there? Nathan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Only one way to find out. Nathan drove cautiously along the edge of Pinewood Forest, following the narrow dirt path that seemed to disappear into the trees. The discovery of the box and the cryptic note had left him with more questions than answers. Jenny sat beside him, holding Scout tightly as the puppy continued to whimper, his eyes darting toward the shadows outside the window. This isn't just about stray dogs, Jenny said, breaking the tense silence. Someone went through a lot of trouble to leave that collar and those coordinates, but why us? Why now? Nathan didn't answer immediately. His focus was on the road ahead, but his mind was racing. The photographs, the note, the strange glow in the cabin, everything felt connected, yet he couldn't piece it together. Maybe Scout was supposed to find someone, anyone, Nathan said finally. And we just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Jenny glanced at the puppy, her expression softening. Or the wrong place at the wrong time. They reached a clearing deeper in the forest, where the path widened slightly. Nathan parked the car and cut the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional distant call of a bird. The air felt heavy, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Nathan opened the glove compartment and pulled out a flashlight. Stay here with Scout, he told Jenny. I'll take a look around. Jenny hesitated, but she could see the determination in his eyes. Be careful, she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan stepped out of the car, the flashlight's beam cutting through the darkness as he scanned the area. The ground was uneven, littered with fallen branches and patches of moss. His boots crunched softly against the dirt as he moved forward, his every sense on high alert. He didn't have to go far. Just beyond the clearing, he found something that made his blood run cold. A small cluster of shallow pits, each one filled with discarded collars. Some were old and rusted, while others were newer, the leather still supple. Nathan crouched down, picking up one of the collars. It was engraved with a single word: hope. What the hell is going on here? Nathan muttered to himself. Back at the car, Scout started barking, his tiny body trembling with renewed fear. Jenny tried to calm him, but his cries grew louder, more urgent. It wasn't until Nathan returned, his face pale and his hands gripping the collar tightly, that the puppy finally quieted down. "Collars," Nathan said, his voice low. "Dozens of them. All buried in pits just beyond the clearing." Jenny's eyes widened. Do you think someone's hurting these dogs?" "I don't know," Nathan admitted, "but whatever's happening, it's deliberate. These collars, someone's been collecting them. And they all have words engraved, just like Scout's." Jenny looked down at the puppy, who had pressed himself against her chest, his tiny tail tucked between his legs. What could this mean? Is it some kind of message? Nathan sat heavily in the driver's seat, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. But it's not safe here. We need to get back to the station and figure this out." The drive back to town was tense, the weight of their discovery hanging heavily in the air. Scout had finally fallen asleep, his small body curled up on Jenny's lap. Nathan kept his eyes on the road, but his mind was elsewhere. Who had left those collars, and why had they sent Scout to him? As they approached the edge of town, Nathan's radio crackled to life. "Harper, this is dispatch. We've got a call you need to hear." Nathan picked up the receiver. "Go ahead." "There's been a report of suspicious activity near Pinewood Forest," the dispatcher said. "A local hiker spotted someone loading what looked like animal cages into a van. They took off before we could get a plate number, but they were heading in your direction." Nathan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Got it. We're on our way." Jenny looked at him, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "This isn't a coincidence, is it?" Nathan shook his head. "No, someone's trying to cover their tracks." They turned onto the main road, scanning the area for any sign of the van. Scout stirred in Jenny's lap, letting out a soft whine as if sensing the tension. Nathan's eyes darted back and forth, searching for anything out of place. "There!" Jenny exclaimed, pointing to a vehicle parked on the shoulder of the road. It was a white van, its back doors slightly ajar. Nathan pulled over a safe distance away and grabbed his flashlight and service weapon. "Stay here," he told Jenny firmly. "If anything happens, call for backup." Jenny nodded, her arms tightening protectively around Scout. Nathan approached the van cautiously, his flashlight illuminating the ground ahead. The area was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. As he got closer, he noticed the rear doors were hanging open, revealing several empty cages inside. Her faint metallic smell lingered in the air, making his stomach churn. "Police!" Nathan called out, his voice firm. "Is anyone here?" There was no response, but as he rounded the side of the van, he noticed something that made his heart skip a beat: a trail of paw prints leading into the woods. They were small, too small to belong to anything but puppies. Nathan's jaw tightened. Whatever was happening, it wasn't over yet. Nathan followed the trail of paw prints into the woods, his flashlight cutting through the growing darkness. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, and every crunch of leaves under his boots seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. Behind him, the white van sat abandoned on the roadside, its open doors swaying slightly in the breeze. He crouched down to examine the prints more closely. They were fresh, heading deeper into the forest in a zigzagging pattern, as though the animals had been frightened and running aimlessly. But where had they gone? And why had someone left the van in such a hurry? Nathan's radio crackled softly, pulling him from his thoughts. "Harper, you okay out there?" Jenny's voice was laced with concern. "I'm fine," Nathan replied, keeping his voice low. "The van's empty, but there's a trail of paw prints leading into the woods. I'm going to follow it." There was a pause on the other end. "Be careful. Whoever's behind this might still be out there." As Nathan moved deeper into the woods, the trail became more erratic. The paw prints were joined by larger boot prints, suggesting someone had been chasing the animals. The trees closed in around him, their gnarled branches forming a canopy that blocked out the fading daylight. The atmosphere was suffocating, every shadow and sound a potential threat. Then he heard it, a faint whimper. Nathan froze, his heart pounding. He scanned the area with his flashlight, the beam finally landing on a small, shivering shape huddled beneath a fallen log. It was another puppy, its fur matted and its eyes wide with fear. It looked up at Nathan, letting out a pitiful cry as it tried to crawl closer. "Hey there, little one," Nathan murmured, crouching down and reaching out a hand. The puppy hesitated, but eventually dragged itself forward, revealing an injured hind leg. Nathan's chest tightened at the sight. As he carefully picked up the puppy, he noticed something familiar around its neck, a collar identical to Scout's, with the same elegant engraving. This one bore the word, "Safe." "What is going on here?" Nathan whispered, cradling the injured pup against his chest. The whimpering had drawn Nathan's attention, but now he realized it wasn't the only sound. Somewhere deeper in the woods, he could hear faint voices, muffled but growing louder. He quickly moved behind a tree, his hand instinctively resting on the grip of his weapon. The voices were coming closer, accompanied by the faint beam of a flashlight cutting through the trees. "We need to move them faster," one voice said, low and urgent. "I told you, the van's gone," another voice replied, agitated. "We have to get the rest of them before someone finds out." Nathan's stomach dropped. Whoever these people were, they were still actively involved in whatever operation was taking place here. And they were close, too close. The injured puppy in his arms let out a soft whimper, and Nathan quickly shushed it, pressing his back against the tree to remain hidden. The voices continued to approach, their tone growing more frustrated. "We shouldn't have left the collars," the first voice muttered. "It's going to lead them right to us." Nathan's mind raced. The collars, they weren't just random. They were part of some sort of system, a trail of breadcrumbs left behind either intentionally or as a desperate act of defiance. And now, whoever was behind this was trying to cover their tracks. The voices moved past him, heading in the direction of the van. Nathan took the opportunity to slip away, his steps careful and deliberate as he retreated deeper into the woods. He had to get the injured puppy back to the car, and fast. When he finally emerged from the forest, Jenny was waiting anxiously by the cruiser, Scout barking in her arms. Her eyes widened when she saw the second puppy cradled against Nathan's chest. "What happened?" she asked, rushing forward. "Found him under a log," Nathan said, his breath coming in short bursts. "And I heard voices, 2 people, probably the ones who abandoned the van." "They're trying to move the rest of the dogs." Jenny's expression hardened. "We have to call for backup." Nathan nodded. "Do it. But first, we need to get this little guy to safety." As Jenny radioed for assistance, Nathan carefully examined the second puppy. Its leg was swollen and bruised, but it didn't appear to be broken. The collar around its neck intrigued him. The word "safe" seemed to contradict the dire circumstances in which the puppy had been found. "What do you think it means?" Jenny asked, glancing at the collar. Nathan shook his head. "I don't know, but it's starting to feel like someone's trying to send a message." Backup arrived within minutes, 2 additional patrol cars and an animal control unit. Nathan briefed the team on what he had discovered, sharing the location of the van and the voices he had heard in the woods. The officers quickly formed a plan to sweep the area, hoping to apprehend the suspects and rescue any remaining animals. Meanwhile, the animal control team took both puppies into their care, promising to treat their injuries and keep them safe. Scout whined as they carried the injured pup away, his little tail wagging anxiously. "Don't worry, buddy," Nathan said, giving Scout a reassuring pat. "We'll make sure they're okay." As the officers disappeared into the woods, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The collars, the cryptic words, the coordinated efforts to move the animals. Everything pointed to a larger operation, one that extended far beyond the quiet town of Maplewood. He glanced at Jenny, who was watching Scout with a thoughtful expression. "You think whoever left those collars wanted us to find them?" she asked. Nathan nodded slowly. "I do. And I think whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing." Nathan stood near the patrol cars, watching as the officers disappeared into the forest to search for the suspects. His mind raced as he tried to piece together the fragments of this increasingly bizarre case. Beside him, Jenny crouched down to comfort Scout, who had been whining softly ever since the injured puppy was taken away. The sight tugged at Nathan's heart, but he knew there was no time to dwell on emotions. Answers were needed. "What now?" Jenny asked, her voice quiet but resolute. Nathan exhaled deeply. "We wait for the team to report back. But something tells me this goes deeper than just a few people in the woods. Those collars, hope, and safe, they mean something. Someone wanted us to find these dogs, and I don't think it's the same people who are trying to move them." Jenny frowned, running her fingers through Scout's soft fur. "Do you think it could be a whistleblower? Someone on the inside trying to expose what's happening?" "It's possible," Nathan admitted. "But if that's the case, they're playing a dangerous game. Whoever's behind this isn't messing around." The radio on Nathan's belt crackled to life, snapping him out of his thoughts. "Officer Harper, this is Delta Unit. We've apprehended 2 suspects near the abandoned van. No sign of additional dogs yet, but we're continuing the search." Nathan grabbed the receiver. "Understood. Secure the suspects and keep me updated." He turned to Jenny, his jaw tight. "They've got 2 of them. Hopefully, we'll get some answers." "Do you think they'll talk?" she asked, rising to her feet. Nathan shook his head. "People involved in things like this don't usually cooperate. But maybe they slipped up, left something behind at the van or the cabin." As they waited for more updates, Nathan decided to take another look at the note they had found in Scout's box. He unfolded the paper, studying the elegant handwriting once more. "They must be safe. Trust the dogs. They'll lead you to the truth." The words seemed almost poetic, but Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that there was a deeper meaning. Trust the dogs. What truth were they supposed to uncover? "Do you still have the first collar?" Jenny asked, glancing at him. Nathan nodded, pulling the collar engraved with hope out of his pocket. He laid it beside Scout's collar and the note, trying to see if there was any hidden connection between them. Jenny tilted her head, her brow furrowing. "What if the words on the collars are clues? Like a breadcrumb trail?" "Breadcrumbs leading to what, though?" Nathan asked, his frustration evident. Jenny hesitated before speaking. "Maybe not what, but who. Whoever left these messages must have known the dogs would find someone who cared enough to follow the trail." Scout let out a small bark, startling both Nathan and Jenny. The puppy stood up on his tiny legs, his nose pointed toward the forest. He barked again, more insistent this time, as if he were trying to say something. Nathan's eyes narrowed. "You think he knows something?" Jenny shrugged, picking up the pup. "Dogs have instincts we can't always explain. Maybe he remembers something or someone." Nathan grabbed his flashlight and gestured toward the woods. "Let's see where he leads us." Scout squirmed in Jenny's arms, barking excitedly as Nathan led the way into the forest. They followed a faint path that veered away from where the officers had gone, Scout's behavior growing more animated with each step. The deeper they went, the more the air seemed to change, thicker, quieter, almost as if the forest itself was holding its breath. After about 15 minutes of walking, they reached a small clearing. In the center stood a dilapidated shed, its wooden planks weathered and overgrown with ivy. The sight sent a shiver down Nathan's spine. "This doesn't feel right," Jenny whispered, clutching Scout tightly. Nathan nodded, his hand resting on the holster of his weapon. "Stay behind me." The shed's door creaked loudly as Nathan pushed it open, the sound echoing ominously in the still air. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single dusty window, but it was enough to reveal the unsettling scene before them. The walls were lined with photos, images of dogs, some of them wearing collars with engraved words, just like Scout's. Beneath the photos, shelves were stacked with files, each labeled with dates and names. A large corkboard dominated one corner of the room, covered in maps and notes connected by red string. Jenny stepped closer, her eyes wide as she took it all in. What is this?" Nathan approached the corkboard, his flashlight illuminating the tangled web of information. The maps marked locations across the state, with handwritten notes scribbled in the margins. Extraction point, no interference. Target secured. Phase 2 underway. Hope, safe, found. "This is some kind of operation," Nathan said, his voice low. "Whoever's behind this has been tracking these dogs for a long time." Scout barked sharply, drawing their attention to a metal box in the corner of the room. Nathan crouched down and opened it carefully, revealing a collection of collars, each one engraved with a different word: courage, strength, freedom. "These aren't just dogs," Jenny said, her voice trembling. "They're symbols. Someone's using them to send a message." Nathan's mind raced as he tried to make sense of it all. The collars, the notes, the photos. It was like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. But one thing was clear. Whoever had orchestrated this was deeply committed to their cause, whatever it might be. The sound of a branch snapping outside the shed made both of them freeze. Nathan turned off his flashlight, signaling for Jenny to stay quiet. He drew his weapon, his heart pounding as footsteps approached the door. "Who's there?" Nathan called out, his voice firm. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a figure silhouetted against the moonlight. It was an older woman, her face lined with age but her eyes sharp and piercing. She stepped inside, her gaze landing on Scout. "You found them," she said softly, her voice filled with both relief and urgency. "You're the ones I've been waiting for." Nathan lowered his weapon slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the older woman. She appeared unarmed and unthreatening, but there was an undeniable intensity in her gaze. Scout, meanwhile, wagged his tail furiously as though recognizing her. The woman knelt down, extending a hand toward the puppy, who immediately ran to her, nuzzling into her palm. "I've been through a lot, haven't you, little one?" she murmured, stroking Scout's head gently. Then she looked up at Nathan and Jenny. "Thank you for finding him, and for following the signs." Nathan exchanged a glance with Jenny, who was still holding the other collar. "For you're going to have to explain what's going on," he said firmly. "Who are you and what do these collars mean?" The woman straightened up, brushing dirt off her hands. "My name is Evelyn Hayes. Well, I guess you could call me a guardian of sorts." She gestured to the photos and documents lining the shed walls. "This isn't just a collection of random information. It's a record of the dogs we've saved and the people we've tried to stop." Jenny frowned, stepping closer to the board. "Stop from doing what?" Evelyn hesitated, her gaze dropping to Scout, who was now sitting quietly by her side. "From exploiting these animals. There's a group, well-funded, organized, and ruthless, that's been using dogs for illegal experiments and trafficking. They see them as tools, not living creatures. My team has been working to rescue as many as we can, but we're running out of time." Nathan's grip tightened on his flashlight as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The collars, the cryptic notes, the abandoned van. It all pointed to something far bigger than he had anticipated. But one question still nagged at him. "Why the collars?" he asked. "Why not just take the dogs to a shelter or report this to the authorities?" Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "We've tried that, but this group has connections everywhere, even in law enforcement. If we're not careful, the dogs we rescue end up right back in their hands. The collars are a way to communicate, to signal to those who are trustworthy, people like you." Jenny looked stunned. "You're saying this operation is so deep that even the police can't be trusted?" "Not all of them," Evelyn said quickly, "but enough to make it dangerous to involve anyone who isn't carefully vetted. That's why we leave the dogs with people we believe will act, people who care." Nathan's mind raced as he processed her words. It explained the collars, the notes, and even the way Scout had been left so strategically. But it also raised more questions, questions that Evelyn seemed reluctant to answer. "And the dogs," he pressed. "Why leave them out in the open like that? Why not contact us directly?" Evelyn sighed, her shoulders sagging. "Because they're the key to everything. Each one of them has been through something, seen something, that could expose this operation. The collars are like breadcrumbs, leading us to the next step. But it's not just about saving them. It's about uncovering the truth." Jenny glanced at the photos on the wall, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief. "You've been doing this for how long?" "Too long," Evelyn replied, her voice tinged with weariness. "And we've lost more than we've saved, but I'm not giving up, not until we've shut them down for good." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of Evelyn's words settling over them like a heavy fog. Nathan glanced at the puppy sitting at her feet, then at the injured pup they had rescued earlier. Both were innocent victims in a much larger battle, one that seemed far from over. "What do you need from us?" he asked finally, his tone steady but resolute. Evelyn met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and urgency. "I need you to trust me and to help me. There's a transport coming tonight, not far from here. If we can intercept it, we might be able to rescue the rest of the dogs and gather the evidence we need to bring this operation down." Nathan felt a pang of doubt. This wasn't what he had signed up for, but the determination in Evelyn's voice and the trust in Scout's eyes left him with little choice. As the sun began to set, Evelyn laid out the plan. The transport would be passing through a secluded road about 5 miles from their location. She had intel suggesting that it would be heavily guarded, but she believed they could intercept it with the element of surprise. Jenny looked uneasy. "This sounds dangerous. What if they're armed?" "They probably will be," Evelyn admitted, "but we're not going in blind. I've got backup waiting at the rendezvous point, people who've been working with me for years. All I need is your help to get there." Nathan nodded slowly. "We'll help, but if this goes south, I'm calling in reinforcements. I'm not risking lives unnecessarily." "Fair enough," Evelyn said, extending a hand. "Thank you, truly." The drive to the rendezvous point was tense, the atmosphere in the car heavy with anticipation. Scout sat quietly on Jenny's lap, his small frame trembling slightly, as if sensing the gravity of the situation. Nathan kept his eyes on the road, his mind racing with a mix of fear and determination. When they arrived, they were greeted by a small team of individuals, men and women dressed in plain clothes but clearly experienced. Evelyn introduced them quickly, explaining their roles in the operation. Each carried a quiet confidence that reassured Nathan, though the stakes remained high. As they waited for the transport to arrive, Nathan crouched down beside Scout, scratching behind the puppy's ears. "You've been through a lot, haven't you, buddy?" he murmured. "Let's hope this is the last time." Scout wagged his tail faintly, his eyes bright with a mixture of trust and determination. Nathan couldn't help but smile, despite the tension in the air. Jenny approached, her voice soft but steady. "Whatever happens tonight, we're doing the right thing." Nathan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Let's just hope it's enough." The clearing where the group waited was bathed in shadows as night fell, the dense forest around them muffling the sounds of the outside world. Nathan leaned against his patrol car, watching the team Evelyn had assembled as they prepared for the interception. They moved with quiet efficiency, checking equipment, sharing brief instructions, and maintaining a tension-filled silence. Despite their calm exteriors, the weight of what they were about to do was palpable. Scout, sensing the shift in atmosphere, stayed close to Jenny, his small body pressed against her leg. She absent-mindedly stroked his fur, her eyes darting between Nathan and Evelyn, who stood at the edge of the clearing, whispering urgently about the plan. "This feels bigger than us," Jenny said softly, breaking the silence. Nathan turned to her, his expression unreadable. "It is," he admitted, "but sometimes we don't get to choose the battles that find us." Jenny nodded, though her brow furrowed with worry. "And what happens if we're wrong? If this goes sideways? We don't know who we're up against." Nathan exhaled deeply, his gaze fixed on the darkened road ahead. "We're not wrong. Look at Scout. Look at that injured puppy we found. Whatever's happening here, it's not right. And if we don't do something, who will?" Evelyn approached them, her face lined with determination. "It's time. The transport will be here in less than 10 minutes. Are you both ready?" Nathan nodded, adjusting the flashlight on his belt. Jenny hesitated before responding, her voice quiet but firm. "We're ready." Evelyn gave them a reassuring smile, though it did little to ease the tension. "Remember, we're aiming for minimal confrontation. Our goal is to intercept the transport, document everything, and secure the dogs. No heroics, no unnecessary risks." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Understood. Let's get this done." As they moved into position, Nathan couldn't shake the unease settling in his chest. The forest felt alive with unseen eyes, every rustling leaf and snapping twig amplifying his nerves. Scout, cradled in Jenny's arms, seemed unusually alert, his ears perked and his nose twitching. They crouched behind a cluster of bushes near the road, the headlights of the incoming transport casting long, eerie shadows through the trees. Evelyn signaled for silence, her hand raised as the vehicle approached. The truck was larger than Nathan had expected, its imposing frame rumbling down the dirt road like a beast in the night. As it slowed near the clearing, Evelyn's team sprang into action. 2 members blocked the road with their vehicles, while others emerged from the shadows, flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Stop the truck!" Evelyn shouted, her voice commanding. The driver hesitated, the vehicle lurching to a halt. Nathan and Jenny stayed back, watching as Evelyn approached the cab with her team. The driver, a burly man with a nervous expression, rolled down the window, his hands visibly shaking. "What's this about?" he demanded, his voice gruff but edged with fear. Evelyn flashed a badge, one that Nathan hadn't noticed before. "Wildlife Protection Unit. We have reason to believe this transport is carrying illegal cargo. Step out of the vehicle." The driver hesitated, glancing toward the back of the truck. Nathan's instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. "I'll check the back," Nathan murmured to Jenny, who nodded, clutching Scout tightly. As Nathan moved toward the rear of the truck, he noticed a faint sound, whimpering. His pulse quickened as he unlatched the doors and swung them open, revealing a heartbreaking scene. Dozens of dogs, crammed into cages far too small, stared back at him with wide, frightened eyes. The stench of urine and fear filled the air, and Nathan felt his stomach churn. Some of the dogs were visibly injured, their fur matted with blood and dirt. Jenny gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God!" Scout let out a low whine, squirming in Jenny's arms as if he wanted to leap into the truck and comfort the other dogs. Nathan stepped inside, his flashlight sweeping over the cages. "They're dehydrated," he said grimly. "Some of them might not make it if we don't act fast." Evelyn appeared at his side, her expression a mix of anger and sadness. "We need to get them out of here now." "What about the driver?" Nathan asked. "He's being detained," she replied. "We'll question him once we secure the dogs." Nathan nodded, moving quickly to unlock the cages. Jenny helped him, her hands trembling as she lifted a small, emaciated puppy from one of the enclosures. The dog whimpered weakly, nuzzling into her chest as if seeking solace. "Shh! It's okay," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe now." As they worked, Evelyn's radio crackled to life. One of her team members, stationed as a lookout, sounded the alarm. "We've got incoming vehicles. 2 of them. Looks like reinforcements." Evelyn's face hardened. "Everyone, move! Get the dogs into the van." "Tau?" Nathan's heart pounded as the team scrambled to act. The sound of approaching engines grew louder, the forest once again alive with tension. Scout barked sharply, as if warning them of the danger closing in. Jenny handed the puppy she was holding to one of Evelyn's team members, then grabbed Nathan's arm. "What do we do?" Nathan didn't hesitate. "We protect these dogs. And no matter what." The first of the incoming vehicles screeched to a halt near the clearing, its headlights cutting through the chaos. Men in dark clothing emerged, their faces obscured by masks. They moved with purpose, their eyes scanning the scene. "Get back!" Evelyn shouted, positioning herself between the men and the truck. "This is a protected operation. You have no authority here." One of the men stepped forward, his voice cold and menacing. "You've made a mistake interfering with us. Stand down or you'll regret it." Nathan stepped up beside Evelyn, his hand resting on the holster of his weapon. "I don't think so." The clearing was alive with tension as the masked men stood opposite Evelyn's team, their dark silhouettes illuminated by the truck's headlights. Nathan's pulse quickened as he assessed the situation. The odds weren't in their favor. Evelyn's team was outnumbered, and these men looked like they meant business. Scout let out a low growl from Jenny's arms, his tiny frame trembling but determined. Jenny tightened her grip on him, her eyes darting nervously between the 2 groups. "Let the dogs go," Evelyn said firmly, her voice steady despite the palpable threat. "You've already lost. We have evidence. There's nowhere for you to run." The man in front, who appeared to be the leader, chuckled darkly. "You think this ends with you? You have no idea who you're dealing with." Nathan stepped forward, his stance resolute. "Maybe not, but I know enough to stop you here and now. Walk away, or this gets ugly." The leader's expression hardened. "You don't scare me, officer, and neither does your little rescue mission." The air grew heavier as the men began to spread out, their movements calculated and deliberate. Evelyn's team tightened their formation, readying themselves for whatever was about to unfold. Nathan's hand hovered over his holster, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring. Just as it seemed like the situation would erupt into violence, a loud bark shattered the silence. All eyes turned to Scout, who had wriggled free from Jenny's arms and darted toward the truck. He stopped in front of one of the cages, barking insistently and pawing at the door. "What is he doing?" Jenny whispered, her voice tinged with worry. Nathan followed Scout's gaze and froze. Inside the cage, a larger dog, a German Shepherd with striking amber eyes, was staring back at them. But it wasn't just the dog's appearance that caught Nathan's attention, it was the collar around its neck. Unlike the others, this one had a small blinking device attached to it. "Evelyn," Nathan called out, his voice urgent. "You need to see this." Evelyn hurried over, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of the shepherd and its peculiar collar. "What is that?" she asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and dread. Nathan crouched down, examining the device more closely. "It looks like some kind of tracker, or maybe a camera." The leader of the masked men took a step forward, his voice laced with mockery. "Smart dog, isn't he? Too bad you won't have time to figure out what that collar does." Evelyn turned to him, her expression fierce. "What is this? What are you hiding?" The man smirked but didn't answer, his silence more telling than any words could have been. Nathan's mind raced. If the collar was a tracker, then it meant someone else was watching, someone who could be far more dangerous than the men they were currently facing. He reached for his phone, quickly snapping a photo of the device before glancing at Evelyn. "We need to get this dog out of here," he said firmly. "Now." Evelyn nodded, her jaw set. "Agreed, but we're not leaving without the others." The leader let out a low laugh, his amusement chilling. "You won't get far. Even if you leave here tonight, you'll never escape what's coming." Nathan ignored him, focusing instead on unlocking the cage. The two dogs exchanged a brief glance, as if silently communicating, before the shepherd positioned itself protectively in front of the smaller puppy. The standoff continued, neither side willing to back down. Nathan's grip on his holster tightened as the masked men began to edge closer. Evelyn's team stood their ground, but the tension was razor-sharp. Suddenly, the sound of sirens pierced the air, their wailing cry growing louder with each passing second. The masked men froze, their leader cursing under his breath. Evelyn glanced at Nathan, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. "Did you call for backup?" Nathan shook his head. "No. This wasn't me." The sirens grew deafening as two police vehicles screeched to a halt at the edge of the clearing. Officers poured out, their weapons drawn, and the masked men quickly realized they were outmatched. "Drop your weapons and get on the ground," one of the officers barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. The leader of the masked men hesitated for a moment, his gaze flicking between the officers and his team. Finally, he raised his hands in surrender, signaling for his men to do the same. One by one, they dropped to their knees, their weapons clattering to the ground. Nathan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, relief washing over him. He turned to Evelyn, who was already instructing her team to secure the dogs and prepare them for transport. As the officers began cuffing the men, one of them approached Nathan. "We got an anonymous tip about suspicious activity in the area," the officer explained. "Looks like we showed up just in time." Nathan's brow furrowed. "Anonymous tip, did they say anything else?" The officer shook his head. "Just gave us the location and told us to hurry." Evelyn looked thoughtful, her gaze drifting to the German Shepherd standing protectively by Scout's side. "It's almost like someone wanted us to succeed," she murmured. Nathan glanced at the Shepherd, his mind racing with possibilities. Who had tipped off the police, and what was the true significance of the collar the dog wore? As the masked men were led away, and the dogs were loaded into transport vans, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of a much larger mystery. The German Shepherd's amber eyes met his, and for a brief moment, Nathan felt as though the dog was trying to tell him something important. As the dust settled and the last of the masked men were driven away in police cars, the clearing returned to an uneasy quiet. The dogs, now loaded into transport vans, whimpered softly, their fear evident but slowly fading in the presence of calm voices and gentle touches from Evelyn's team. Scout and the German Shepherd stood side by side near Nathan and Jenny, the larger dog still wearing the mysterious collar that had set off alarm bells in everyone's mind. Nathan crouched down, his hand hovering near the shepherd's head. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, his voice steady but cautious. "Let's see what you're hiding." The shepherd tensed but didn't growl or move away, its intelligent amber eyes locked on Nathan. Slowly, Nathan reached for the collar, his fingers brushing against the cold metal. He found a clasp and carefully removed it, holding it up to examine it more closely. The device was small, almost unremarkable, except for the blinking light at its center. Evelyn stepped closer, her expression serious. "That's not just a tracker," she said, her voice low. "It looks like a data storage device too. Someone wanted to monitor this dog and maybe more." Nathan turned the collar over in his hands, noticing a faint engraving on the side. It was a string of numbers, almost like a serial code. "Does this mean the shepherd was part of something bigger?" he asked, glancing at Evelyn. She nodded. "It's possible. If this dog was being tracked, whoever owned this collar might still be watching or searching." Jenny, holding Scout close, frowned. "But why would someone go through all this trouble for a dog? What makes him so special?" The shepherd, as if understanding the conversation, let out a low whine and nudged Nathan's arm with its nose. Nathan smiled faintly. "I don't know," he said, "but I think he's trying to tell us something." Evelyn's team began packing up their equipment, but she stayed behind with Nathan, Jenny, and the dogs. "We need to figure out who this collar belongs to," she said. "And fast. If this is connected to illegal activity, we could be dealing with something much larger than just dog trafficking." Nathan nodded. "I'll take the collar to the station. Maybe our tech team can extract data from it." Evelyn hesitated, then added, "We also need to find a safe place for these dogs, especially this one." She gestured to the German Shepherd. "He's at the center of this, whether we like it or not." The group returned to Evelyn's facility, where the rescued dogs were given food, water, and medical attention. Nathan and Jenny helped with the intake process, each dog's condition carefully documented. The German Shepherd, however, remained by Nathan's side, refusing to leave his newfound protector. Jenny watched the shepherd with a mix of curiosity and admiration. "It's like he's chosen you," she said, her voice tinged with wonder. Nathan chuckled, scratching the dog behind the ears. "Yeah, well, I didn't exactly sign up for this, but I guess I don't have much of a choice now." Scout barked, wagging his tail as if in agreement. The sight made Jenny laugh, a rare moment of levity amidst the day's chaos. As night fell, Nathan found himself sitting outside the facility with the German Shepherd at his feet. The collar lay on the table beside him, its blinking light now extinguished. He stared at it, his mind racing with questions. Where had this dog come from? What had he been through? And why had he ended up here at this moment? Evelyn joined him, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to him and sat down, her gaze thoughtful. "You did good today," she said. "Not everyone would have stepped up the way you did." Nathan shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. "I just did what felt right. Those dogs didn't deserve what was happening to them." Evelyn nodded, her expression softening. "No, they didn't. And thanks to you, they have a chance now." The shepherd shifted, resting its head on Nathan's knee. He absent-mindedly stroked its fur, feeling the tension in his chest begin to ease. "Do you think we'll ever figure out what's really going on here?" he asked. Evelyn smiled faintly. "We've already started. The collar, the dogs, the men we apprehended, they're all pieces of a puzzle. It's going to take time, but we'll get there." Nathan glanced down at the shepherd, whose eyes had closed as it drifted off to sleep. "I just hope it's enough," he murmured. Inside the facility, Jenny was tending to Scout, who had finally begun to relax after the day's events. She smiled as she watched him curl up in a warm bed, his small body finally at peace. But her mind lingered on the German Shepherd and the collar. There was more to this story, she was sure of it. As she turned off the lights and headed for the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The morning sun broke through the large windows of the facility, casting a golden glow over the resting dogs. Nathan found himself awake earlier than usual, sitting by the German Shepherd's side. The collar, now deactivated, rested on the desk before him. He stared at it intently, as if willing it to reveal its secrets. Evelyn walked into the room, a tablet in her hand. "Good morning," she greeted softly. "I've got some updates." Nathan sat up straighter, nodding. "What did you find?" Evelyn pulled up a series of emails and reports on her tablet. "Our tech team managed to extract data from the collar. It's not just a tracker, it's also a recording device. There's audio and even some video footage. And it gets stranger. The location data indicates that this dog was moved through several countries over the last year. Whoever owned this dog was covering a lot of ground." Nathan leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What's on the recordings?" Evelyn hesitated. "It's disturbing. Conversations in multiple languages, some discussing illegal wildlife trade, and others hinting at experiments on animals. This wasn't just trafficking, Nathan. It was something much darker." The weight of her words hung in the air. Nathan glanced at the shepherd, who seemed to sense the shift in energy. The dog stood, pressing its nose against Nathan's hand as if offering silent reassurance. Evelyn continued, "There's more. One of the voices in the recordings mentions a specific location, a facility in a remote part of the country. It sounds like it could be where the shepherd escaped from." Nathan's jaw tightened. If that's true, there could be more animals trapped there. "We need to act," Evelyn nodded. "Agreed. I've already contacted some people who can help us, but this is dangerous territory, Nathan. Whoever is behind this won't give up easily." As Evelyn left to make further preparations, Jenny entered the room, Scout trotting at her heels. "What's going on?" she asked, noting the tension on Nathan's face. Nathan filled her in on the latest developments, and Jenny's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "You're going to that facility, aren't you?" "I don't see any other choice," Nathan replied. "If there are more animals in danger, we have to do something." Jenny bit her lip, glancing at Scout. "Then I'm coming with you." Nathan shook his head. "It's too risky. I can't put you in harm's way." Jenny crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "You're not doing this alone. Besides, you'll need someone who can handle the dogs if things go south." The German Shepherd barked softly, as if in agreement. Nathan sighed, realizing there was no arguing with Jenny. "Fine," he said, "but you follow my lead." "No unnecessary risks," Evelyn returned moments later, her expression grim but determined. "We've got a team assembling now. We'll leave at dusk. The facility is in a heavily wooded area, so we'll need to approach carefully." Nathan nodded, his resolve solidifying. "Let's do this." As the day wore on, the team prepared for the mission. Supplies were packed, maps studied, and strategies discussed. The German Shepherd stayed close to Nathan, its presence a steady reminder of why they were doing this. By nightfall, the group was ready. 2 vehicles pulled out of the facility, heading toward the remote location indicated in the collar's data. The tension in the air was palpable, each person acutely aware of the risks ahead. After hours of driving, the vehicles came to a halt on a secluded dirt road. The team disembarked, moving quietly through the dense forest that surrounded the area. Evelyn led the way, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. As they neared the coordinates, the faint glow of lights became visible through the trees. The facility loomed ahead, a stark concrete structure that seemed out of place in the natural surroundings. Nathan signaled for the group to stop, his voice barely above a whisper. "We'll split into 2 teams. Evelyn, take Jenny and Scout to check the perimeter. I'll head inside with the others." Evelyn nodded, her expression serious. "Be careful." Nathan and his team approached the facility's main entrance, their footsteps silent on the damp forest floor. The German Shepherd stayed at Nathan's side, its ears pricked and eyes alert. Inside, the air was cold and sterile, the walls lined with cages and equipment. The faint sound of whimpering reached Nathan's ears, and his heart clenched. He moved quickly but cautiously, scanning each room for signs of life. In one room, he found rows of cages filled with animals. Dogs, cats, and even exotic species, all looking malnourished and frightened. His stomach turned at the sight, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "We need to get them out," he said, his voice firm. "Now," Meanwhile, Evelyn and Jenny circled the facility's perimeter, their flashlights sweeping through the darkness. Scout suddenly barked, darting toward a cluster of bushes. Jenny followed, her heart racing. What she found made her blood run cold. A hidden entrance, partially concealed by foliage. She called out to Evelyn, who quickly joined her. "This could be another way in," Evelyn said, her tone urgent. "Let's check it out." The two women entered the passage, their steps careful as they navigated the narrow corridor. It led to a small room filled with documents and computers. Evelyn immediately began sifting through the papers, her eyes widening as she realized what they had stumbled upon. Back inside the main facility, Nathan and his team were unlocking cages, freeing the terrified animals. The German Shepherd stood guard, its presence a calming force for the newly liberated creatures. Suddenly, a noise from the hallway caught Nathan's attention, a sharp, metallic clang. He signaled for the team to stay quiet, his hand moving to his holster. The sound grew louder, closer. Nathan's pulse quickened as he prepared for whatever was coming. Nathan gripped his flashlight in one hand and his sidearm in the other, his heart pounding as the metallic clanging grew louder. The German Shepherd at his side let out a low growl, its hackles raised. The tension in the air was suffocating, every sound amplified in the cold, sterile hallway. Suddenly, the source of the noise emerged from around the corner. A man in a lab coat, startled by Nathan's presence, froze mid-step. His eyes darted to the group and then to the cages behind them, now empty. Panic flashed across his face, and he turned to run. "Stop!" Nathan shouted, his voice echoing through the hallway. The man hesitated for a fraction of a second before bolting down the corridor. Nathan sprinted after him, the German Shepherd keeping pace effortlessly. "Secure the animals," he barked to his team over his shoulder. "I'll handle this." The chase led Nathan through a maze of hallways, each turn revealing more signs of the facility's dark purpose. Glass windows revealed rooms filled with strange equipment, files scattered across desks, and abandoned cages. The air was thick with the stench of chemicals and fear. The man in the lab coat burst through a set of double doors, and Nathan followed, his adrenaline propelling him forward. The room he entered was massive, lined with monitors and blinking machinery. In the center stood a large glass enclosure, empty except for a few scattered tools and restraints. "Who are you?" Nathan demanded, leveling his weapon at the man. "What's going on here?" The man raised his hands, his breathing labored. "I'm just a technician," he stammered. "I don't know anything, I swear," the German Shepherd growled, stepping forward as if to reinforce Nathan's demand for answers. The man's gaze flicked nervously between the dog and the officer. "Please," he begged, "I'm not in charge here." "I just follow orders." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Then tell me who is in charge. What is this place?" Before the man could answer, a voice crackled through an overhead speaker. It was cold, calculated, and eerily calm. "I see you've found my facility, officer." Nathan spun around, searching for the source of the voice. The German Shepherd barked, its ears swiveling toward a hidden camera in the corner of the room. The voice continued, "You've caused quite the disruption, but I must admit I'm impressed. It's not every day someone gets this far." "Who are you?" Nathan demanded. "And what are you doing here?" The voice chuckled. "That's not important. What matters is that you've meddled in something far beyond your understanding. But since you're here, let me offer you a choice." The monitors in the room flickered to life, displaying live footage of the facility. One screen showed Evelyn and Jenny in the hidden room, frantically sorting through documents. Another showed the animals Nathan's team had just freed, now huddled together near the facility's exit. The voice spoke again. "You can leave now, officer, and take your precious animals with you. Or you can dig deeper, but I guarantee you won't like what you find." Nathan's grip on his weapon tightened. "I'm not going anywhere until I know the truth." The voice sighed. "Very well. But don't say I didn't warn you." Before Nathan could respond, the monitors went dark, and the lights in the room flickered ominously. A loud mechanical hum filled the air, followed by the sound of doors slamming shut throughout the facility. The man in the lab coat paled, muttering, "Oh no." "What's happening?" Nathan demanded. "The lockdown," the man whispered. "He sealed us in." Nathan's mind raced. The animals, his team, Evelyn and Jenny, They were all trapped inside. The German Shepherd barked sharply, as if urging him to act. "Where's the control room?" Nathan asked the technician, his voice firm. The man hesitated, then pointed to a door on the far side of the room. "Through there, but it's heavily secured." Nathan didn't waste a second. He motioned for the technician to move, keeping his weapon trained on him. "You're coming with me. Open the door." The three of them, Nathan, the technician, and the German Shepherd, made their way to the control room. The door was reinforced with a keypad and fingerprint scanner. The technician fumbled nervously, his hands shaking as he entered the code and pressed his thumb to the scanner. The door clicked open, revealing a room filled with more monitors and a massive console. Nathan pushed the technician inside and began scanning the screens for any signs of his team. On one monitor, he saw Evelyn and Jenny barricading the door to the hidden room, their faces tense but determined. On another, his team worked to keep the freed animals calm despite the growing chaos. Nathan turned to the technician. "Shut down the lockdown, now!" "I can't," the man said, his voice trembling. "Only he can." "Then override it," Nathan snapped. "There has to be a way." The technician hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "There's a manual override, but it's risky." Nathan didn't hesitate. "Do it." As the technician worked, the German Shepherd stood at Nathan's side, its gaze fixed on the door. Nathan couldn't help but marvel at the dog's unwavering loyalty and courage. "We'll get through this," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The sound of footsteps in the hallway outside the control room snapped Nathan back to attention. He raised his weapon, his body tense. The German Shepherd growled low in its throat, ready to defend its new friend. The door burst open, and Nathan found himself face to face with a shadowy figure. The moment of truth had arrived. Nathan held his weapon steady, his breath measured as the shadowy figure stepped into the control room. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The German Shepherd barked sharply, its stance protective as it positioned itself between Nathan and the intruder. The man who entered was tall, his features partially obscured by a hooded jacket. His presence exuded a cold, calculating authority, and his eyes scanned the room with an unnerving calmness. "Officer Nathan," he said smoothly, his voice the same one that had spoken over the intercom. "I didn't think you'd get this far." Nathan tightened his grip on the firearm. "Who are you, and what is this place?" The man smirked, taking a step closer. "You're standing in the remnants of something far larger than you can imagine. A network built on innovation, experimentation, and yes, profit. But you wouldn't understand, would you? People like you cling to laws and ethics, blind to the possibilities that lie beyond." Nathan took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. "I understand enough to know that what you're doing here is wrong. You're exploiting these animals, treating them like commodities instead of living beings." The man laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the room. "Exploitation. Is that what you think? These animals are part of something revolutionary. The collars, the experiments, it's all for the greater good. But of course, you'd rather play hero than see the bigger picture." "Save the speeches," Nathan shot back. "I'm shutting this down whether you like it or not." The man's smirk faded, replaced by a cold, menacing glare. "You're welcome to try, but I should warn you, this facility doesn't leave loose ends." At that moment, the monitors flickered back to life, displaying scenes from throughout the facility. Evelyn and Jenny were still barricaded in the hidden room, their faces tense as they worked to secure the documents they'd uncovered. Nathan's team was shown herding the freed animals toward an emergency exit, their movements hurried and precise. The shadowy man gestured toward the screens. "You see," he said, "you're not just risking your life, officer, you're endangering all of them. Do you really think you can save everyone?" Nathan's jaw tightened, his resolve hardening. "I don't think I know." The shadowy man moved toward the control panel, his hand reaching for a hidden switch. The German Shepherd growled, baring its teeth, and Nathan raised his weapon. "Don't even think about it," he warned. The man froze, then slowly raised his hands. "Fine," he said, a note of mock surrender in his voice. "But tell me, officer, how far are you willing to go? Are you prepared to make sacrifices?" Nathan didn't respond. Instead, he gestured toward the technician. "Override the lockdown. Now, the technician hesitated, glancing nervously between Nathan and the shadowy man. I can't. He won't do anything, Nathan interrupted, his tone firm. You have my word. Just do it. The technician nodded reluctantly and began typing commands into the console. The room was silent except for the soft clicking of the keyboard and the hum of the machinery. The German Shepherd remained alert, its eyes never leaving the shadowy man. After what felt like an eternity, the technician spoke. The lockdown is lifting. The exits will be operational in 30 seconds. Nathan felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. The shadowy man suddenly lunged toward the control panel, his hand reaching for the hidden switch. The German Shepherd reacted instantly, leaping forward and knocking the man off balance. The two tumbled to the floor, the dog snarling as it pinned the man down. Nathan moved quickly, securing the intruder with a set of zip ties. "Good work," he said to the shepherd, his voice filled with gratitude. As the lockdown lifted, Nathan's radio crackled to life. "The animals are safe," one of his team members reported. "We're ready to move them out," Nathan nodded, speaking into the radio. "Good. Keep them moving and stay alert. We're almost through this." Turning back to the shadowy man, he crouched down to meet his gaze. "It's over," he said. "You're going to answer for everything you've done." The man chuckled darkly. "You think this ends with me? There are others, bigger, more powerful. You've barely scratched the surface." "Maybe," Nathan replied, "but it starts with you." The German Shepherd barked once, as if in agreement, and Nathan couldn't help but smile. "Let's get out of here," he said, motioning for the technician to follow. They exited the control room, leaving the shadowy man restrained and awaiting the authorities. As they made their way through the facility, Nathan reunited with Evelyn and Jenny. Both women looked relieved to see him, and Evelyn handed him a folder filled with documents. "This has everything we found," she said. "It's enough to expose what's been going on here." Nathan nodded, his gratitude evident. "Good work. Let's make sure it gets to the right people." By the time they reached the exit, the sun was beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the forest. The freed animals were being loaded into transport vehicles, their frightened expressions slowly giving way to a sense of safety. Nathan turned to Evelyn and Jenny. "We did it," he said, his voice tinged with exhaustion but also triumph. The German Shepherd stood by his side, its tail wagging softly as if it understood the victory they had achieved. As the convoy began its journey back to the rehabilitation center, Nathan couldn't help but reflect on the night's events. They had faced danger, uncovered a sinister operation, and saved countless lives. But more importantly, they had proven that courage and compassion could prevail, even in the face of darkness. By the time they reached the exit, the sun was beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the forest. The freed animals were being loaded into transport vehicles, their frightened expressions slowly giving way to a sense of safety. Nathan turned to Evelyn and Jenny. "We did it," he said, his voice tinged with exhaustion, but also triumph. The German Shepherd stood by his side, its tail wagging softly as if it understood the victory they had achieved. As the convoy began its journey back to the rehabilitation center, Nathan couldn't help but reflect on the night's events. They had faced danger, uncovered a sinister operation, and saved countless lives. But more importantly, they had proven that courage and compassion could prevail, even in the face of darkness. Nathan glanced at the German Shepherd and gave its head a gentle pat. "You've earned some rest, buddy," he said softly. The dog wagged its tail in response, its eyes brimming with a mix of exhaustion and loyalty. But Nathan's thoughts were far from restful. The shadowy man's parting words echoed in his mind. "You've barely scratched the surface." It was a chilling reminder that the fight wasn't over. There were others out there, others who saw animals as mere commodities, devoid of life or value beyond their monetary worth. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. This victory was significant, but it was just the beginning. When they reached the rehabilitation center, they were met with a team of veterinarians, conservationists, and volunteers who had been preparing for their arrival. The atmosphere was one of controlled urgency, as the animals were carefully unloaded and guided into their new, safe enclosures. Evelyn approached Nathan, holding the folder of evidence tightly against her chest. "We need to get this to the authorities as soon as possible," she said. "If we move quickly, We can shut down the rest of this network before they have a chance to cover their tracks. Nathan nodded. I'll make the call. This operation ends here. Jenny joined them, her expression a mix of relief and determination. What about the German Shepherd? She asked, gesturing to the dog that had been Nathan's constant companion throughout the night. Nathan crouched down to the dog's level, scratching behind its ears. I think it's safe to say he's found his place, he said with a smile. He's coming home with me. The dog barked happily. As if it understood, Evelyn and Jenny exchanged a smile, the weight of the night momentarily lifting as they watched the bond between man and dog solidify. But their moment of relief was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Chambers, the head veterinarian at the center. Her expression was grave as she approached the group. Nathan, Evelyn, we need to talk. Dr. Chambers led them to a private office where she placed a file on the desk. We've started running tests on the animals you rescued, she began. Most of them are malnourished and traumatized, but they'll recover with time and care. Nathan frowned. What's the bad news? Dr. Chambers sighed. It's about the collars. They weren't just tracking devices. They were designed to monitor the animal's vitals and inject them with something. Evelyn's eyes widened. Inject them with what? We're not entirely sure yet, Dr. Chambers admitted, but whatever it is, it's not natural. We've sent samples to the lab for analysis, but it could take days to get results. Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. The operation he had uncovered was far more sinister than he had imagined. We need to keep those animals under close observation, he said. Whatever they were injected with, we can't let it spread or cause further harm. Dr. Chambers nodded. We're already on it, and we'll keep you updated as soon as we know more. As they left the office, Nathan's mind raced. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the tip of the iceberg. The network he had disrupted might have been one of many, and the substances in those collars hinted at an experimentation far beyond simple trafficking. Later that day, Nathan found himself in the enclosure where the German Shepherd was being temporarily housed. The dog greeted him with a wagging tail and an eager bark, as if sensing that its life was about to change. Nathan knelt down, looking into the dog's intelligent eyes. You've been through a lot, he said quietly, but you're safe now, and as long as I'm around, you always will be. The dog licked his hand in response, sealing the unspoken promise between them. Nathan stood, a renewed sense of purpose filling him. The world was full of darkness, but he had seen firsthand the light that could break through it, courage, compassion, and the unyielding bond between humans and animals. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The evidence Evelyn and Jenny had gathered led to a series of raids on other facilities connected to the network, resulting in the rescue of more animals and the arrest of key figures behind the operation. The German Shepherd became a symbol of hope, its story inspiring countless others to take action against animal cruelty. Nathan's life changed in ways he hadn't expected. The dog he named Shadow became his loyal partner, accompanying him not only at work, but in every aspect of his life. Together, they became advocates for animal welfare, using their story to raise awareness and fight for change. One evening, as Nathan and Shadow sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the horizon, he reflected on how far they had come. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure: they would face it together. Shadow rested its head on Nathan's lap, a contented sigh escaping its lips. Nathan smiled, his hand resting on the dog's sleek fur. "We've got a lot of work to do, buddy," he said. "But I think we're ready for it." As the first stars appeared in the night sky, Nathan felt a deep sense of gratitude for the challenges he had faced, the lives he had saved, and the loyal companion by his side. The journey had been unexpected, but it had led him exactly where he needed to be. Did this story inspire you? Do you believe in the unbreakable bond between humans and animals? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us next time for another incredible story that celebrates the resilience of the human spirit and the animals who change our lives.